Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, if you would like to be able to read my comic books online on a digital library, if you'd like to be able to participate in our Patreon exclusive Discord where we share artwork, give each other feedback, discuss art, styles, programs, techniques, all of that, you can become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, if you'd like to get work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm writing, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to pick up physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Amazon Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Self-contained, done in one story. You can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains the conclusion to the series, issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, character sketches and designs, page layouts, thumbnails, script excerpts, how I use photo reference to create my pages, basically showing you how I put the comic book together. All that and more at amazon.jeremy.net. There's links to all of these in the description of the video. And for the graphic novels, there are book flip-throughs on my YouTube homepage. All right. And with that, let's get into today's artwork. So I am continuing with the Gorgon series. And I will show you a bit of what I've been up to, because I've been jumping around. The fact of the matter is, I wouldn't say that I've hit a roadblock with this piece, but I was coming along with it, and I've been intentionally trying to do more digital painting. And if you look at this, it's definitely more of a painted style, although I kind of fall back into comic book style line work on the statue piece there. But, I've got this piece here, and I decided to work on it all in black and white, just work out volume values before going in and trying to add any color. And I will tell you that at this stage, I was looking at this piece, and I just wasn't feeling it. I can't tell you why. I don't think that it's a horrible painting, and I'm not saying that I'm abandoning this painting. What I am saying is I'm going to put this on pause and try and go back to something that I'm going to try and basically take a step back as a problem solve. Usually I find that if I'm having a problem with the painting, there's something with the drawing underneath. If I'm having a problem with the drawing underneath, then there's a problem with the thumbnails. So usually when you're having trouble with an illustration, the solution is one step previous to wherever you're at. So I decided to go back to just the drawing stage. And it could also be the fact that maybe I just need some good photo reference of bodies to render against. But I went back to the thumbnail. I have it there on a higher level, so I can on a level turned off, so I can just reference it when I need it. But this is the thumbnail that this piece is based off of. And when I look at this thumbnail, the anatomy isn't perfect. But when I look at the level of values, like this totally works for me. So in some aspect, in some sense, it was the act of adding detail that ruined the piece. So I need to take a step back, fix the anatomical details that are a little bit off, and from there, try to figure out how to make a piece that feels finished but has as little detail as possible. Because like I said, to me, this thumbnail works. I look at the thumbnail, if I flip the thumbnail, it still works for me. So, whatever I'm doing that's not working, I feel like I got the values to work in the thumbnails, but they aren't working in the finished piece. So I'm going to try and explore that. But for now, in fact, I might as well leave it flipped and work flipped for a little while. I seem to have put a stray mark in here. It's probably easier just to erase this as opposed to trying to undo to the stage where I put it in there, because I don't know where I laid that mark down. Anyway. It's a very Bridgman feeling figure. You drop the brush opacity down a bit. Make this brush a little bit larger. Guess the brush could be even larger. I don't know why this brush is so tiny. You know what? It's not that it's tiny. It's that I've been working with, I've been drawing. This one is designed, it's at a scale for, at a print resolution, like a 16 by 20, 300 DPI, like a large poster, because that's what the piece was intended for. And I just realized that my brush, I'm using a brush that isn't sized, that's sized for like when I'm drawing on canvas size. If I really needed a larger brush, I could just, I'm using the studio pen that comes with Procreate. And I could just switch to the studio pen I made called Studio Pen XL, which is just a larger sized studio pen. See, now as I try to go in here and do details on the face, all of a sudden this feels too large. It's like I'm always fighting that balance, trying to get it just right. And it's interesting drawing these. I'm trying not to get too carried away with how much detail I'm putting in the face, because this face, as you can see from the thumbnail, is for the most part going to get covered up by her face. She's going to be, they're basically just spooning and they're kind of pressing their heads against each other. But what I found was that the head felt very awkward without me really putting in the rest of the structure of the face, even if I'm going to cover it up. Sometimes you don't have to draw stuff because you know you're going to cover it up. So you're like, why waste the time and energy? But other times, a piece will feel extremely awkward if you don't block in the hidden things so that the parts that are sticking out feel like they're naturally connected to something. I mean, in this case, it's the cheekbone. But being that the cheekbone and the ears are really the only part of this guy's head that are showing, I need to give them more structure than I normally would. Normally, that's the kind of thing that I don't, anything other than like the eyes, nose, mouth, the actual features that we normally focus on, anything other than that, I find I may describe it, but I will downplay it because I don't want it to be I don't want anything to distract from the main features. But in a piece where those main features are hidden, the downplayed areas become more important. But it's still a balance between not making them so prominent or so detailed that they become distracting. It's like drawing ears. The challenging thing about ears is if you don't give them any structure, they just look like discs on the side of the head. If you give them too much structure, or rather, if you were to render them in a very unless your style is photorealistic, if you render an ear with too much detail, it jumps out at you. And you don't really want anything on the piece jumping out at you. You want everything to feel like it's in harmony with each other. Let's see. Jay King is in the chat. He says, "What's good, brother? What's good, people?" It's all good. I am in repair mode with this piece because I got pretty far along with the painting, and I just was not happy with where I ended up. So I've gone back to my my happy place, my safe place, in terms of just traditional line work, doing something that's almost more like pen and ink. So I'm focusing more on drawing now. And it's also interesting because I've been doing a lot of sketching, digital sketching lately, and I've been getting myself into the habit of working with a very light brush. And I suppose I could, you know what? That's actually true. I can go over this entire thing and just lighten it up. I can take the eraser. That eraser is not big enough. Let me go to my studio, my XL Studio pen, and drop the opacity way down. In fact, let me see if I can grab a brush that's even bigger. I'm gonna grab this soft brush because this thing gets huge. And then just drop the opacity way down. And then it's like, let me, a little bit more. Now it's kind of like erasing with kind of a soft kneaded eraser. And I can just lift away what I need. And I know that I could just drop the opacity on this entire layer, but I'd rather keep this layer at 100% opacity and really only think about the transparency when I'm in terms of the brush work, in terms of like what opacity do I have the current brush I'm using set at. Because then you end up at a weird space where you're constantly trying to like, why isn't this getting darker? Why isn't this light enough? And then you think that you have the brush set very lightly, and then you realize, oh wait, no, it's that the layer was at 50% or 20% opacity, or you're trying to get stuff darker and getting really frustrated because it won't get past a certain darkness. And again, it's the same thing. You just have your layer set at an opacity that's not super dark. And it's not that I am against that. It's that I have gone back and forth between the two different methods, drawing with my brush at 100% opacity and using the layers to adjust what I'm doing. And I've done it where I've worked at brushes at a lower opacity and built up the line work or the artwork. And I have not decided which one I do or don't like. So I go back and forth between the two. And I find that unless I'm specifically starting a piece knowing that I'm going to work where I'm using a sketch layer at a low opacity, it's easy to just keep it at 100%. Otherwise, I'll forget what I'm doing and I'll forget why a layer isn't working the way I wanted it to. I see Amaris is in the chat. Hey, thanks for joining in. She says sorry she was late. She's on down with her phone. Well, happy Father's Day to on the phone with her dad. Happy Father's Day to your dad. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Be going out and I'll be having a dinner with my dad later today. Always nice to see the fam and hang out with them. All right, I'm going to switch back to that studio pen. But I'm going to use the large one because I find that I end up wanting a larger brush for erasing. All right. So now see, already I found myself wanting to start getting too detailed. Like just the fact that I started drawing details into that eye there, and I'm like, what am I drawing that for? That eye's going to be completely covered up. I need to mentally continue to remind myself that any detail I put in the face is in service of giving the basically this region, the from the cheek to the ear, it's so that it just doesn't feel flat. Any detail I put in the face is in service of this area. And I need to constantly remind myself of that. Otherwise, I'm just going to start putting in detail that I don't need. Which is funny because I'm not somebody who's like a super rendery styled guy. But I think there's something in our brains that just make us put detail in. I remember, I can't remember what class it was. It might have been junior high, maybe it was high school, but wherever I first heard the concept of horror vacui, which is, it's not a phobia per se, but the translation is fear of emptiness, fear of empty spaces. And I remember hearing it in an art class when we were just discussing artists, and it might have been Van Gogh we were talking about. Is a long time ago, but the idea of artists not leaving any empty space in the canvas, and that there's, I guess, some sort of psychological discomfort that human beings have with empty space, and how sometimes it can be quite refreshing when you see somebody who really does something bold with negative space, leaves a large area of it empty and just puts the focus on just one side or in one corner, really effectively using negative space as a drawing tool or a compositional tool, I should say. I don't think it's something that I have really explored in my work with any great depth or success, but it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, just trying to get these cheekbones to lay down the way I want them to. And again, it's not even about the cheekbones per se, it's about the little amount of shadow that you're going to get on the other side of the cheekbone, because all of this, you can see that there's a faint shadow in here, and if I turn, I really have the opacity to set where I want it, so I'll just click it off. You can see there's a gray shape underneath his head. That's going to be her head, so it's very faint, but yeah, her face is going to completely cover his. So I think the big mystery for me here, as I mentioned at the start of this stream, I've got a thumbnail that I'm very happy with. I've got a painting stage that I feel got too messy. And my goal is to figure out how much I can remove from the painting. That's kind of the challenge that lays before me. How much detail can I get rid of and still have that sense of structure and volume? Let's see here. I see James is in the chat. He says, "What character is this?" Well, surprise, surprise, this is a continuation of the Gorgon piece. So the piece that I've been working on the past 2 weeks. I showed this real quick at the beginning, but I'll flip back to it. So I took this thumbnail, which was overwhelmingly the favorite thumbnail when I was asking people to vote online. And I started painting it digitally. When I say painting, I was intentionally trying not to use line work and just do color and value. And I got, I think, pretty far in, but I'm not happy with how the painting is coming out. Like, I'm just at this stage. It's sort of an ugly, awkward stage, and I'm not abandoning this painting. I'm going to come back to it, but I feel like I need to go back to my line art stage and sort of sort out what details I want to bring in to refine this, what details I want to push, use and push back. And the thing that's odd for me is when I look at this piece in a thumbnail stage with no detail at all, I'm very, very happy with this. So the challenge that I have is figuring out how little detail I can add in and make this piece feel finished. So I decided to go back to the drawing stage because there's some anatomical things. The shoulder of the male figure doesn't lock in quite right. The fingers are definitely wonky. So I'm just kind of going in here and redrawing. So let's see here. So James says there is a Hammer horror film called The Gorgon. He says, I'm reminded of that, but I see what you're doing. He said, yeah, putting some thought and effort into it. You know what's funny? First off, thank you. A lot of times for most of the pieces I do, I will end up starting a piece, getting to a certain level on it, deciding that there are things wrong with it, dropping it, then coming back and doing another version. I mean, that's why I end up with pieces where I've got like 2 or 3 different versions of it. When I hit a roadblock, I'll take a step back and try to figure out what it is that I'm missing. And it's also odd that this piece, it might be that I am going about this the wrong way in terms of doing a detailed drawing, because the anatomy feels like it's what's off in the thumbnail, but detail feels like the last thing this piece needs. Like stripping detail away really seemed like it was working. But you know what? That is also the beautiful illusion that thumbnails give us. Because thumbnails are so loose, we often will look at it and feel like, oh, this is fine. This works. And then when you start doing the actual piece, you'll see all of the little odds and ends that weren't really properly thought out. So I am trying to think out these odds and ends. And James also says, typically when I draw faces, I'll start with some human faces, then move into alien ones. Yeah, you know what? Oddly enough, also, I think the only reason why I started with that face, I mean, I'd already kind of drawn the body in here pretty detailed and then erased out a bunch of it. Or I erased enough to kind of knock down the values. I will frequently draw faces last because I found this was something that was taught to me in a figure drawing class. The instructor that I studied with, Carl Ganas, he pointed out that a lot of times artists will, if they draw a face that they like, they will jump through all kinds of hoops to not have to erase that face if the body's wrong. But a lot of times the problem simply is, you messed up on the body, you need to change it. But because you've got a face on there that you really like, you're like, nah, maybe I'll change this part. Maybe I'll change that part. You'll jump through all these hoops instead of just redrawing the head that you need to redraw. So I find it's easier for me to do all of that work to the face and try to draw the face, to the body. I will do as much as I need to do to get the body right. Let's see here. I'm kind of imagining myself in the position where I've got my elbow up and around, kind of laying on it. I'm trying to imagine. So her head would kind of be laying in this socket that he's creating. So I'm kind of just trying to imagine that pose and kind of almost, honestly, this arm, the arm that is laying there, is out too far. I'm not sure how to do it where you don't lose I realize I cheated it because I wanted to be able to see his hand. I didn't want the hand to just be underneath her head, which is realistically where it would be. So maybe I need to change the angle so that instead of having his hand curled like this, I think if I want to have his hand that exposed, I need to change the angle to have it more out like this instead of turning down. Because if it's turning down, his upper arm would have to be way too long. So, and these are things that I didn't catch in the thumbnail. These are the kind of things where looking at it now with a more analytical eye, I'm seeing flaws in it that are off, as opposed to flaws that are perfect. Which, is being smarmy about it, but sometimes there are mistakes that you make in a piece, and you're like, the mistake is what makes it work. So, I shouldn't be so cavalier about that. Oh yeah, James says, sometimes you have to use yourself as reference. I honestly didn't think I was going to need that much reference for this piece, but the further I get into it, the more I'm like, oh wow, I should probably have taken some photo reference. Where are my little statues? Like my little Michelangelo's David. I don't have a female bust that's this large. I do have one that's actually bigger, but it's like a veiled figure that my wife got me, like very long drape over the head. But I have a bunch of really tiny ones. I've shown them to you guys before on the live stream. But I don't have a really good sized female head that's like can fit in the palm of my hand like that one, which kind of sucks. That would be nice to have that. So what I'm trying to do now is basically place where the head of his humerus would be. So I can get that position of the arm better. Now what's interesting is doing it this way, it actually feels like I'm making it too short. So maybe the difference is that the elbow shouldn't necessarily be all the way up here, but this is too short. So let's try the Goldilocks method. You know what? That one's too big. That one's too short. Let's try the one in between and see if it's just right. The Goldilocks art method. One's too big. One's too short. Hopefully the one in the middle is just right. I'm not a very good pool player, but it's funny. Whenever I would go out to bars with friends, we'd be out drinking and shooting pool. Because I was a poor pool player, what I would try to do is just get the ball that I wanted to sink in. I just tried to get it close to the pocket that I was aiming for. And then if I miss, then the next shot it's set up for. As opposed to actual good pool players who can sink one ball and set up for a next shot at the same time. I'm looking at this guy's head in comparison to the body, and I feel like his head is too small. So if you look at like the pelvis height, pelvis would be a little bit higher up here. Then going through the middle of the, you look at that height compared with this height, well, it doesn't really feel off. But what it does feel like is like the torso in between is too long. I think that's what is wrong proportionally. Because the head, let me redo those. So the head, the upper body, I should say, is 4 heads high. And the head and the pelvis are about the right shape, but the torso in between is too short. So if I just enlarge the head, then the pelvis is going to be a little too small. So the question is, what is the easiest way to correct this? I'm just going to lasso the head and stretch it out a little bit. Not a ton. Go up. Just that much. Is that too much? That's enough. It's not a lot. It's not way out of proportion. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same with the pelvis in the sense that I'm going to pull the pelvis up into the rib cage. So I'm doing two things at once. As I'm making the torso, I'm making the rib cage in between the pelvis and the head shorter, and making the pelvis itself larger. And by doing it this way, it means I don't have to recalibrate the torso as much, the space in between the two. They're out of proportion, and I'm making the thing cut into the thing that's too large. And to be honest, I could have done the same thing with the upper body if I had also lassoed in the collarbone. And if I had lassoed in the collarbone, I could have pulled the whole thing down instead of pulling it up. Now I'm trying to decide whether I want to go back and do that. Nah, we'll work with it. Let's see here. Monkey God in the chat, giving some applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Chugging along here, making some corrections. Now I'm just sort of loosely blocking in the lat muscles going into the back. All right, so let's get back to this arm thing here. Let's say I place the elbow out here. So the forearm is shorter than the upper arm. But if you go all the way, if you go from the elbow to the tips of the fingers, that's too long. That's actually longer than the upper arm. But if you go from approximately the knuckles to the elbow, then you'll get something that's about the same length as the forearm. So what I'm trying to do here is just on a two-dimensional axis, figure out from the shoulder, from where the head of the humerus connects to the body, from the bone to the elbow, and then go from elbow to knuckle. And I'm trying to just figure out the distance, block in a distance that feels right to me. And I'm trying to add a little bit more swoop to that shape so it doesn't feel so stiff. And what I can also do is right in here where I've got the joint, the wrist joint, I can take that hand and I can turn it a little bit. Not a ton, just enough to break up the monotony and the straightness that I made out of this. Because I do tend to block things in very straight, and then I have to add some flow to it afterwards. Although, given the fact that this guy's going to be a statue, him being a bit more blocky is not necessarily a bad thing. When looking at this now, I think when I first did this concept, when I sketched this out, I really made the male fingers way too long. But I think that's the point of doing these phases where you come back and you make corrections, is you observe things that you didn't necessarily catch when you did it the first time. You did your rough pass. Now I need to remember that one of the things about this hand is that there's a serpent coming through. And his hand is basically his hand is grasping that serpent. So I need to kind of turn or angle, or really just put the arc of what that serpent will be, and then let the hand wrap around that space. By the way, something I forgot to mention at the top of the stream, for anyone who is a Patreon subscriber, this week is going to be another session of Art Book Study Group on Tuesday. So we'll be having our 2.5 to 3 hour long live stream Tuesday at 7 p.m. or 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. So that will be coming this week. And if you aren't able to make it, the replay will be available for you. So in comparison, I wasn't that off with the original drawing I did. Now I need to decide, do I want to work his arm out or do I want to work her head into this? Actually, I think I want to work out her torso, which her torso I don't really have any problems with. It's more like I want to just have the structure of it blocked in well before I draw his arm on top. Let me take a look at my thumbnail here. Now, something I'm noticing in the thumbnail is that I turned his torso too much towards us. So if I've got these two boxes here that represent their rib cages, her rib cage, the front plane, is turned slightly towards us, but it's mostly profile. Now on his, it's supposed to be his back is turned slightly towards us. And I have too much profile showing. So I need to move his shoulders forward a little bit. It's not a full-on back view, but It's not even a 3/4 back view. It's just turned a little bit more than I have it. And these are the kind of things that, you know, it might seem ridiculous to be that obsessive about it, but these are the sub details of the gesture. You know, it's like I already worked out what the gesture of this figure is, and now there's all these little odds and ends, and I'm like, well, if this is the gesture, then this is how this body part fits in, and this is how this body part fits in, and this is how this body part fits in. And it's just a matter of orchestrating them. That's the word I was looking for. Singing harmonize, wrangle, orchestrate. I'm trying to orchestrate the deeper levels of this gesture. That's how I look at the anatomy of this figure. The anatomy of this figure isn't, oh, I'm drawing cool muscles. It's, I worked out a gesture I like, and now I'm trying to, the anatomy is trying to harmonize with it. Or rather, I'm trying to get the anatomy to harmonize with it. Getting it to flow. In some cases, that means erasing some stuff that I drew before that I thought looked good to try and get to something that's a little bit better. And again, this is another one of those where on first pass, I think not on first pass, but on this revision, I may have gone too far in terms of how much this back is showing. And now I'm trying to dial it back, and dial it in to something that's just right. Trying to get the shape of the lats just right. Latissimus dorsi muscle is the big kite on the back. And it's interesting because I was super happy with how his torso looked until I started drawing her torso in. That's one of the things that I also have to remind myself why it's not a good idea to just focus on one element of the drawing, like draw the head until it's done, or draw all of the anatomy of this figure when I may, just by virtue of adding the other elements to this piece, realize, oh, wait, I need to adjust and tweak and move things around. So as you can see, this is what I was saying before about how her head is going to cover up a large chunk, almost the entirety of his face. And I was showing this, the thumbnail when I was trying to decide what I wanted to fix. I was showing it to my buddy, shout out to Rob, Yo Robs on Instagram. And he was saying, well, it seems like the faces are composed so that he's staring towards her and she's staring into him. And I kind of flattened them out in the digital painting that I had. Her leg is going to be going across his. I think the real challenge I'm facing at this particular juncture in the sketch is that when things get a little bit muddled and I have a lot of overlapping forms, is I want to go darker. I want to go with a darker brush and really lock everything in. But I need to intentionally keep things light so I can keep adjusting and tweaking and moving stuff around. The fact that right now the female figure is kind of translucent, I can still draw through her. Because in fact, I'm going to have to draw parts over her. I'm going to have to draw his arm going over her arm going under his arm. Well, her arm going under his arm first and wrapping around his back, and then his arm going on top of her arm but floating over her. And staying light will allow me to do that. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the live stream. I don't have to stay light. I can just adjust with layers, adjust the layer opacity. But that can get a little bit confusing. All right. as much as I love these the pecs and the serratus muscles that I drew into his rib cage, I kind of need to get rid of those and give myself some mental space to throw the arm in here, throw her arm in anyway. Matter of fact, I should cut the opacity of the eraser down a little bit so I can start lightening some of these areas without completely destroying them. We're already at 55 minutes. And because it's Father's Day and I have family plans, I'm not going to run late this live stream like I occasionally do. You know, something that I've been thinking about is so the session that we do on Patreon, the Art Book Study Group, I have been thinking about, I've occasionally put 1 or 2 sessions, made them public for everyone to see, just so you guys can get a taste of what we're doing over there on Patreon. I have been thinking about maybe every few months, like once a quarter, doing one of the sessions, one of the Patreon sessions, but doing it live here. So when we do those sessions, the Patreon members, the Patreon subscribers can talk directly to me during the voice channel, through the voice channel on Discord. I've been thinking about doing one of those sessions where the Patreon members can still talk, and it's just another one of our sessions, but doing it during the doing it on a Sunday, so that everyone else can kind of watch and see what we do there, and also doing it for the 3 hours that we do when we do it just on Patreon. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? Is that something you'd be wanting to see? How do the guys, how do the Patreon subscribers feel about that? Is that something you would be cool with, where every once in a while we'll do one of those sessions, but we'll do it on a Sunday, and you guys will still be able to chime in and talk through the Discord, but let everyone else kind of see what we do when we're analyzing art books? I'm starting to get a little bit too dark with this figure. I'm trying to get a little bit too dark with this with the forearm, which again, I've said that's my my go-to when I feel like I'm getting lost or I want to clarify things. It's like when you're losing an argument. It's like when you're losing an argument, so you start raising your voice because you think you can just make yourself more right by being louder. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to use that as one of my blog posts on Patreon. That will definitely come up as a topic. Because I think we've all been in that situation where we catch ourselves doing it. We're like, oh no, I've become that guy. I've become that person. Okay. So I'm trying to look objectively. Now's a good time to flip. I'm trying to kind of check the proportions of her arm and see if they make sense. If I were to swing this down here, yeah, that's about right. It's close enough that I'm not going to bitch about it. Now with him, so the real question is how I want his arm to cross her arm, because she is kind of moving straight out. Simple arc like this. So I don't want his to mirror hers, which means he's either got to be moving further out like this above her, which is very awkward, or he's got to be moving down and then cross hers. So let's see what happens if I try this, which is kind of close to what I had originally, where I've got him going over her elbow joint with his elbow joint. So making kind of a compositional X, which is going to move his arm out some. Go from here to here. That's going to put his knuckles there. All right, that's not too far off. Well, a little bit, because I've sort of got the fingertips there. Do I maybe want to... The point is that I want to make sure that I avoid tangents. And when I'm talking about tangents, I'm talking about where a line on the front of the figure overlaps with a line behind it, overlaps with a form. And specifically what I'm thinking about is I don't want his wrist to line up with the line of her spine, which means his wrist either needs to be start out here or it needs to be back behind. One of the two. Putting it behind makes it feel kind of short to me. All right. Now comes the problem I always have, which is as I go in and I refine these things, the figures feel more and more mechanical. And I have to intentionally work to loosen them up, give them more flow. Yes, I draw very angular, which is helpful for trying to give a sense of structure, but it does make for very, very stiff figures. Which was, again, one of the reasons why I was intentionally trying why I was trying to go for that more painterly look. With that said, I've still got a lot of sketching to do on this. I've still got a lot of problem solving to do on this. You guys will see how it goes. I'm making some minor progress on the writing. I want to get back to the point where I'm drawing comics in front of you guys as soon as possible, but the writing just isn't done baking yet. baby steps. I'm working through. I'm trying to give myself space to not rush it and make it as good as I can get it to be, without being a perfectionist. I know. All songs you've heard me sing before. All right. Well, let's wrap it up for now. Again, for everyone out there, you dads, or for you got those of you who are celebrating your dads, hope you all have a wonderful and happy Father's Day. For those who are Patreon subscribers, we've got Art Book Study Group this Tuesday, 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. I'll be posting a reminder on Patreon and on Discord, probably tomorrow, maybe tonight, probably tomorrow. Links to the voice channel. For those of you who would like to participate who aren't currently Patreon subscribers, there's links in the description for the video, unless you're on Twitch, in which case you can just follow the homepage of the channel, and from there you should be able to follow links to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. Again, for as little as $2 a month, you can become a member. And the main reward for everyone is we have a twice monthly Patreon exclusive live stream we call Art Book Study Group. We're digging into some of the best art books around. We've been doing a deep dive ongoing series on Walt Reed's The Figure, which I think is one of the best books on figure drawing fundamentals, just purely working on the structure of the figure. Doesn't get too deep in, it has anatomy, but doesn't get too deep into the anatomy. Lots of volume, lots of structure, lots of fundamentals. Love that book. You can also read my comics on a digital archive. We have Morningstar and I Have the Gods posted there. I have some weird random one-off stories I've done over the years. I've been meaning to post those as well. Just not enough hours in the day. But again, also access to our Discord server where we talk throughout the month, share process, techniques, tips, critiques. There's a tier where you can send me pieces specifically to critique on live stream. So you can do that as well. All that and more at patreon.com/GERIMI. Patreon.com/Jeremy. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, get work in progress animated GIFs, get blog posts about what I'm reading, watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter, newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to pick up physical copies of my comic books or read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, I Have the Gods, a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. My most recent project, Morningstar, tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8, the conclusion of the series. Both volumes have extensive back matter, character sketches, character designs, page layouts, script excerpts, photo reference. I show you how I use reference to put my comics together. You can check out all that and more at amazon.jeremy.net. There are links to all these in the description for the video. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with me, for hanging out, sketching with me. I hope this is inspiring, interesting. Hope you maybe learned something, or maybe it gave you something to think about with your own creative process. That's it for now. Go be creative.